Welcome back, adventurers, once again to Let's Play ChäoS Head. In the last episode, Takumi Nichijou was completely at a loss whether to determine or not Rimi Sakihata was in fact who she claimed to be. Of course, the confirmation by none other than Daisuke Mikumi, or Mizumi, sorry, I always keep getting his last name mixed up now for all of a sudden, but anyway, Daisuke has basically confirmed Rimi's story, which obviously doesn't bode that well for Takumi, as he has no recollection of ever meeting Rimi in the classroom, although that can pretty much be explained away by the fact that he himself admitted that he ignores pretty much most of his classmates every time he goes to school, which is very few, as determined by his minimum attendance chart sheet. Later that evening, of course, Takumi did exhibit uh, signs of sleepwalking, of which he has no real conscious awareness of. But when he actually went over to the hospital in order to see Dr. Takashima again, turns out that he's on a leave of absence, which in Takumi's mind essentially means that the good doctor has all but abandoned him. And now Takumi has nowhere else and no one else to turn to in this entire situation. Well, there is actually one person whom Takumi could actually turn to and confide in. But again, whether or not that person is truly an ally and a friend has yet to be determined. I felt terribly forlorn, and I wanted some source of support. Sorry there. Someone who would protect me. Something that would protect me. That is an odd sentence. I'd be fine with anyone, so someone, please, extend a saving hand towards me. I had to break it to you, Takumi, but you're about to probably regret what you're wishing for.
見つけて早く
Or,
剣を
or maybe not.
そうすれば君は救われるわ
All of a sudden, Takumi is flashing back to Ayase's curious statements in the hallway. I abruptly recall those words. I'd actually forgotten all about Ayase, Sena, and the D-Sword.
剣
If this were a game, I'd be a hero and we'd reach the usual cliché development about my having to get my hands on a legendary sword to defeat the demon. Yeah, if this were The Legend of Zelda, certainly. But it isn't. Without my seeking it out, I'd recently heard the keyword sword from two different 3D girls. There remained a chance that Fez was my ally, although going by her attitude, Girl B, had she been called Sena, was most likely affiliated with the demon girl. Well, at the very least, Ayase seems to be on Takumi's side, so that's something. The sword, huh?
剣だ剣を手に入れるんだそうすれば
However, we can't just get our hands on any run-of-the-mill sword, Takumi. It has to be a special weapon. It has to be what Sena referred to as a D-sword. I muttered to myself as though I'd gone off my rocker. For me, it was the equivalent of clutching at straws, but it's the only lead we have at this point. If I got a sword, I might be released from this nightmare. I couldn't help having such expectations. It wasn't that I believed what Fez said about it granting me salvation, but I lacked anything else to cling to. If nothing else, it would be best to research this. Something tells me that it's going to be hard to find D-swords on Wikipedia, much less the Encyclopedia Britannica. Those were the days. Yes, I am that old-fashioned. Or we could just look up on the search engine. I got down to running an online search immediately. For the moment, I started checking off to see whether a sword similar to the ones carried by Fez and Sena had appeared in any anime, but I couldn't spot anything like that in this season's crop of anime, at least. That's because neither of those swords can be found in any anime. I'd expected as much. I normally check out all the recent new anime. Could be a real handful, given that lately there'd been sometimes be 30 or 40 new shows in one season. But I watched the first episodes of all of them and then decided which to keep following. Of course, since there was MewTube, I didn't have any problems completing my lineup with anime from the BS and CS satellite subscription channels, which is why there was no way I'd overlooked any anime. And no such sword had appeared in any of the shows I'd checked. Have to be specific to certain genres, obviously, but of course, we're coming up empty. It was that distinctive looking. If it showed up, it ought to have caught my eye, but I've no memory of seeing one. Although I couldn't do anything about it if I had seen it when I was being controlled by someone outside myself. True, but that actually wouldn't actually change things that much. Next, I tried running a search about the sword itself rather than any anime series.
くそ、ほとんどがゲームの攻略サイトじゃんか。
Yeah, the fantasy genre does love its swords. Terms I was closely familiar with, such as Ensu's Shangri-La Edge, kept popping up. At this rate, I won't make any progress. Even though I had to hurry up and find it. There are a lot of search results for just swords. We really need to get more specific. I had the sense that Senna had used a more concrete name when speaking of it, but what could it have been? Remember, your nightmare won't end unless you remember.
This sword.
Right, D-sword. I quickly stuck it in the input field and ran a search. I got hits. That's more than I was expecting. Only 2 of them, though. Even so, I was gradually starting to think of these 2 links as my road to salvation. Holding down my excitement, I investigated them in order from the top down. Yeah, the page is dead. Shit, what the hell? Looks like the first site was a dud, unfortunately. The one about amnesia or something like that. No, calm down. Go back one more time and take a look at the cache. The page included an illustration, a recreation based on how the sword was described in works of literature.
元ネタは伝承か。
Sword of Darkness Unleashed upon the world. And, yeah. A lot of this actually sounds more akin to what Ayase would describe as being a D-sword. Because this definitely has language that is very similar to the style used by Phantasm. But at the very least, there is a image of the so-called D-sword, although it's rather mundane compared to the D-swords wielded by Sena and Ayase.
でもセナって女が持ってたのに比べるとこっちは随分地味だな。
In the first place, why was it such a minor sword? Why not go with Excalibur or Kusanagi, something in the Major League? No, this wasn't the time to complain. Major or minor, it didn't matter as long as it could save me. I decided to explore a little more. Continuing, I clicked the second hit. Yeah, just looking back at the description of the first one. A sword of light unleashed upon the darkness of the world called D-Sword. A fictional sword first birthed in ancient Europe by the hand of the legendary evil king Gladiol. Huh. Anyway, this next one is brought to you by the blogger of a guy with too much free time. Imagine that. The words. The words I bought a D-Sword particularly concerned me. Was a D-Sword something you could purchase? Seems that way. The blog's writer was apparently male, so I could deduce that he wasn't the demon girl or Senna. That said, his level of energy was far too different from that of Shogun. Was he a completely unrelated third party, or had the person behind the blog deliberately changed the particulars of how he wrote? In any event, it sounds like a underground rumor of sorts. I understood that no answer would come, no matter how much I thought about it, so I stopped looking at the blog. More importantly, it seemed that the store he had mentioned, the one called Town Vanguard, was located in Shibuya. I had a feeling it was too good to be true, but I also had a feeling it was destiny. There was another way to look at it. It was precisely because the store was in Shibuya that I'd twice run into a girl holding a D-sword smack in the middle of Shibuya. Didn't I often hear about things that were secretly popular with various minority subcultures in Shibuya? That is definitely a bit of a stretch there, Takumi. For now, I looked up Town Vanguard, but it didn't seem to have an official site. Instead, I found an image-based info page on an online map. If they didn't have an official site, that meant they didn't take orders online. So we're gonna have to find it ourselves. I searched Cebu auctions, but didn't come across anything likely looking, which meant that my only option was to go to the store in person. Just treat it like an anime stop and everything will be fine. Unless, of course, it's completely brimmed to the wall with crowds, so that will actually not be such a good thing. I didn't want to go outside very much, but
剣は手に入れなくちゃ。手に入れないとダメなんだ。
it definitely means venturing out into the real world once again. Now, I'd come to think of it as my sole absolute means of fighting back against the demon girl. I didn't know what I would do. In concrete terms, after obtaining the sword, I wasn't brave enough to use it to kill her or anything of the sort. think you're starting to go somewhere down the wrong path there. Even so, I harbor the hope that if I got a sword, I'd be somewhat freed from the terror that tortured me. That is a very forlorn hope, if ever there was one. Yeah, a D-sword was like a protective charm. It would surely strengthen my heart. Something about that sword strangely attracted me. And so we're off to go D-sword hunting. At any rate, it seemed like the store was located near Cat Street, and this is a very dilapidated looking park area. Cat Street is a twisty, winding road from Shibuya to Harajuku that runs about a block off Meiji Avenue. Apparently it had been built by filling in an area that was originally a stream. There are various explanations as to why it originally come to be called Cat Street, such as there being many feral cats, or because it was the sort of narrow path that only cats would use. Well, not that it made much difference to me, or much of a difference to me. In any case, we don't know why it's called Cat Street, only that it's called Cat Street. Cat Street was fairly far away from me. By foot it could easily take 15 or 20 minutes to get there. It'd be a quick trip by bike, but unfortunately I didn't have one. I decided to go by a route that took me past the plaza in front of the station, then past Shoto by way of cutting through Miyashita Park. Setting a quick pace, I crossed the overpass that went over Meiji Avenue. Huh. Finally I'd arrived. Growing ever more impatient, I become irritated at the distance. There were a couple of Sume students on the right-hand crosswalk. Cat Street had been quiet compared to the big shopping district, and its image was far closer to that of Harajuku than Shibuya. The stores lined up there were all chic shops that of course had nothing to do with me. Go off and die. Knowing that I was practically acting delirious as I walked along, I became even more annoyed. For me, being here was like playing in an away game, which could probably be said for anywhere that Takumi goes that isn't his home base or Ensu. Those bastards around me thought they were so damn cool. And there were more couples than the shopping district. They were probably acting like they had money, even though they didn't. So chances are that most of them were window shopping. LOL. Waste of time. I felt some regret, thinking to myself that I shouldn't have come after all, and I accidentally skipped ahead there. My mistake. For now, I went on having a staring contest with my map as I swiftly went along, rushing towards my destination while doing my best not to exchange looks with passers-by. Town Vanguard was deep within a narrow side road that split off from Cat Street.
ここか。
Though I'd only ventured one side street away from the main road, the ambience underwent a dramatic change. It was a thin, narrow, dirty alley, one impossible for cars to pass through. On either side were wood-built residences and out-of-business stores with closed shutters, which invariably came equipped with spray-painted graffiti on them. Cat Street, which seemed so clean from the front with all its high-class brand-name stores, is in the end no more than a flimsy papier-mâché facade, trying to pronounce it properly there. Behind that facade lay any number of mercilessly discarded wrecks. Though I personally disliked both the front and the back. Both were unfamiliar territory for me. The only place I ever wanted to go was Ensu. Even so, Town Vanguard had a far smaller, darker area to it than I had imagined. I started to understand why the blogger who'd mentioned it had described it as an underground store. Despite the fact that it had an open sign hung up, Despite the fact that an open sign had been hung up, you couldn't say it was doing brisk business even by way of flattery. It was awfully hard to enter. How was I supposed to go in such a sketchy-seeming store, when it was asking too much of me just to have me go alone to a gyuden shop? I want to go home. But if we walk away empty-handed, all of this would truly have been for nothing. But I needed to get my hands on a sword, no matter what. What was I supposed to do? I spent a little while going back and forth in front of the store. No one passed through this narrow alley. I'd whiled away 30 minutes with my pacing, but not a single person had gone by me. I decided to brace myself and go on in, but then my courage failed me, causing me to abandon all hope, and I kept repeating this cycle innumerable times. But I couldn't go home empty-handed. This was the only place I could obtain a D-sword. Even though I understood that with my head, my instincts made me reluctant to enter the shop. I imagined that maybe a clerk would come out for me. Given how out of the way it is, Takumi, I will sincerely doubt that. Of course, she'd be a cute maid, and she'd talk to me with the kind of voice you'd hear in anime. She'd have a perfect grasp of exactly what I wanted, and she'd hold a D-sword out to me in a wonderfully friendly manner. Here you are. Please take the sword, master. No, that is definitely not going to happen, in the slightest. Get a hold of yourself. Chill out, me. Just as I thought about how it'd be so much easier if only things would unfold in that way, a lone 3D girl appeared from within the store, as though my thoughts had reached her. Unlike in my fantasy, her clothes were rather gaudy, the kind that made you wonder what nomad camp she'd snagged them from. Her face, however, was amazingly glum. Her hair was cut in the bomber head style, and creepy patterns were drawn on the bandana around it. That's ominous. She said she was a store worker and had come out after seeing me wishy-washily going around outside. My fantasy hadn't exactly become reality. Well, that was to be expected. Before I had any idea of what was happening, the clock forcibly led me inside, despite my having spent so long holding off on entering. I didn't have a choice to turn her down. But in we go. So in the end, I came in. It was all very well that I cleared the most excruciating hurdle, but yeah, this place truly is an antiquated hovel full of old knickknacks. This store was under the demon girl's control, and everything about the D-sword had been a trap to lure me in. I had no right to complain about getting slaughtered on the spot. I swiftly surveyed the store's dim interior. There wasn't a single customer. It has certainly an interesting atmosphere to it, which is actually giving it a bit too much credit there. The air was awfully stagnant and fairly hazy. The unpleasant mix of the smells of tobacco and mold reached my nose. I'd probably start feeling ill if I stayed here for so much as 5 minutes. I had spotted the items that might have been products. It was difficult to judge whether or not they were really for sale. I'm not really seeing any swords standing out in these particular areas. All of them had been left about haphazardly. There was no way to distinguish them from plain garbage. For beginning, one of them had a price tag. They're all on sale on them though. I didn't realize that until I came in. There was a lot of porno merch. Among them was a sort of device that you would often see in rape humiliation emoji. I was at a loss for a safe place to look. Yeah. Apparently the store was similar to a variety shop aimed at adults. After bringing me into the store, the clerk sat down on the stool beside the counter, zoning out as she smoked and showing no indication of continuing to meddle with me. Probably for the best. She must have been one of the sources of the mist in here. Well, that would probably explain half the atmosphere at the store. Regardless of the fact that it had been less than a minute since I'd first come in, nervousness, embarrassment, a weird sense of pressure, and my feeling physically sick made nasty sweat seep out of my forehead. I wanted to leave this otherworldly place as fast as possible. I had to be quick about finding a D-sword. I walked towards the back as I browsed my way through the store. Well, we can't find it, we can't find it. I soon located the corner for fantasy weapons, which had been written about the blog I found. Maybe we should have looked in the corner first. Would have been a good idea. That one corner stood apart from the rest, being the only area with conspicuous colors. Numerous pulled-safe toys had been neatly put up on display. All of them were long tubes. Rather, while they may have been different colors, virtually all of them were lightsabers. Shame they're not real, but then that's probably a good thing. Also, one could tell right away from how badly they were made that they were bootlegs. I was skeptical of whether they'd really glow. It seemed that the light shuriken mentioned in the blog had sold out, which was also surprising. Maybe whoever bought them all, it seems. Except, mixed in with the lightsabers was just one item that was obviously different from the rest. One look was all it took for me to know that it was a D-sword, because it was more or less the same as the illustration that I'd seen online. Well, we found it, but whether or not A, it's real, and B, it's worth having, remains to be seen. I tried picking it up. It was unexpectedly light. I wondered what it was made of, though it seemed like soft vinyl. There was no blade. The edge was slippery, and of course it didn't hurt me in the slightest, even when I stroked it with my fingers. So in other words, it's not a real sword. Compared to the ones held by Sena and Fez, it was poorly designed and lacked a sense of weight. More than anything, it didn't give me the sense that it could sever anything with the lightest of touches. I wondered perhaps if it was a fake. I think that it could very well be a fake. I think we pretty much run on a wild goose chase myself, but anyway. I was worried about it, but there wasn't anything else in the store you could have called a D-sword. Did this even shine in the first place? Doubtful. The D-sword Fez had swung about at a show had glass parts embedded in its blade, which lit off blue light and looked incredibly badass. There was no glass to be seen anywhere on the sword I had in hand. Maybe I ought to give up on buying it. This D-sword was so crudely made as to make me reach that conclusion. Never mind how long it took me to get here, which is actually a fair way. But
見つけて早く剣をそうすれば君は救われる
I recalled Fez's words. Right, if I didn't buy here and now, I'd lose my only chance at obtaining a D-sword. Well, I believe that it's going to help matters. I look cheap at the moment, but maybe once it recognized me as its rightful master, it would manifest a mysterious power. Personally, I'd actually prefer the demon sword Samadare myself, but this isn't that sword. Oh, maybe I'd seen too many anime and manga, but I'd sensed that just that sort of unknown power in Fez and Sena's swords, so even this sword must. What to do? While I debated with myself, the clerk came up and stood right behind me before I knew it. Smirking darkly, she pointed at the D-sword and muttered, 10,000 yen and I'll throw in a free bonus. There is no way that this paltry D-sword is even worth the amount of yen that a middle Uber would fetch on eBay. There is absolutely no way that is the case. Or maybe I'm wrong. At first, its absurd cheapness made me doubt my ears. I certainly hadn't thought it'd be less expensive than a figure. How much exactly do you pay for those, I wonder? I built out a fair amount of savings from MRT, and if it only costs 10,000 yen, I could get away with buying it simply by giving up on purchasing one figure. Wow, looks like Takumi Nishijo doesn't care about 10,000 yen in the slightest. Upon hearing the price and the additional fact that it was the last one they had left, I immediately came to a decision. The free bonus item was a cheap-looking bangle. Frankly, I didn't want it. But of course, we're having it anyway, it seems. I went through hell after buying it. Town Vanguard didn't do deliveries, so my only option was to carry it home myself. Toy or not, my excitement instantly cooled when I thought about how I'd have to cross through the heart of Shibuya carrying such a stupidly long sword. And unlike Fez and Sena, everyone is going to see this particular D-sword. There's nothing that Takumi Nishijo can do about it. Well, I believe that's going to be it for this episode of Let's Play ChäoS Head, and when we return, we're going to have to trudge all the way back to the Kurenai building with the D-sword in hand. As always, adventurers, until next we meet.